Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Double A Team Podcast. I'm your host, Stephen Nagishi. Thank you for joining us on this Monday evening. We've had quite a day. We've had 3 live streams, first with Anthony Russo, and then just a few hours ago with Adam Rank from the NFL Network. Thanking him for joining us in between his work at the NFL Networks in LA studios in between today. And now on to our third and final guest tonight. Certainly somebody that is another NFL draft expert that also happens to be a Cleveland Browns fan and an expert, something that my co-host Ken Fang is very much probably needs some serious conversation as much as I needed one with Adam Rank with regards to the Chicago Bears. It is Bill Sparks from Bill Sparks at Sparks Scouting. Bill, good evening, and thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me on, Stephen. It's a pleasure to finally get to come on here and talk a little ball and talk college football, NFL draft, and obviously both of our franchises being on the wrong side of things.
All right, well, let's start with that one. You know, both teams kind of got blown out, unfortunately, in a very embarrassing fashion. The Browns got beat 41-17 to the Baltimore Orioles. Ironically, the 30-year anniversary of Browns leaving Cleveland to go to Baltimore in their first game as a Raven, of course. 0-2 right now. There has been a lot of chatters with the Browns with regards to their starting quarterback. Joe Flacco ended up getting the job, perhaps as a veteran present, somebody who can at least stabilize the position until, whoever that they have, the young quarterback, Dylan Gabriel, or even, God forbid, Shedeur Sanders. And we'll get a little bit into the Shedeur Sanders chatter in a bit as well as we go along. But through first 2 games, give me your impression of the Cleveland Browns. What stood out? What was good? And, unfortunately, what was bad in the first 2 weeks from your perspective, offense and defense?
Yeah, so the first thing I'll take the offense to start with. The big thing offensively is you have to be very excited about the young talent on the offensive side of the ball. Harold Fannin Jr. at the tight end spot looks like he's going to be a weapon offensively for whoever the quarterback may be moving forward. Quinshon Judkins obviously just signed this past Saturday, but getting his first run in Baltimore, 10 carries for 61 yards. Looks like he could be a future cornerstone at the running back position. Unfortunately, the concerns are that this offensive line looks significantly older, looks significantly slower, as well as the quarterback position is in flux. Joe Flacco brought in to be this, kind of steady the ship type of force, and he really hasn't shown that. He's shown that he's a 40-year-old quarterback. And with how this offensive line's played, his mobility is key. And the problem is he just doesn't have it. It's just not there. And, we all thought immediately when Flacco started week 1 that it was going to be a temporary solution, but we thought we'd probably get 6 or 7 games before we see one of these rookies. Right now, it looks like we might not even make it to London before we see Dylan Gabriel or Shedeur Sanders. More than likely Dylan Gabriel taking snaps there. The big plus is the defense looks right back in 2023 form. This looks like a top 5 unit across the board, from Myles Garrett and Mason Graham on the defensive line to Carson Schlesinger, who's already getting whispers about defensive rookie of the year play. And then on the back end, of course, with Denzel Ward and Grant Delpit. So defensively, things look to be humming right along, but ultimately it's also, you got to be able to put points on the board in the NFL. And this offense just isn't capable of doing that right now.
I was going to ask you, Gabriel or Sanders start soon, and you actually believe that one of them will probably start. I know ESPN Cleveland, Tony Grazzi, or I think, was it Tony Grazzi?
Tony Grazzi and Ken Carman talked about it over on their show on ESPN Cleveland, potentially having him start as soon as this week. I have said in the past that the best way would probably be week 7, which is the game against Miami, with how depleted Miami is in their secondary. But that was also, thinking about Joe Flacco having some form of mobility. But the fact is he has just looked significantly older than what he is right now. Right now, if you told me that they were starting Joe Flacco this Sunday against the Green Bay Packers, I wouldn't think anything of it. I would say let's roll with it. But Kevin Stefanski's also come out and said that they're not in a position to make a change right now. But I think after watching that game against the Ravens, you see he's almost a 41-year-old quarterback. He'll be 41 in January. You see the lack of mobility. He just doesn't trust his eyes downfield, and defenses are forcing him to play, short and intermediate stuff, which is not where he wants to play. I mean, you look at his statistics, 25 of 45 for 199 yards, a touchdown and an interception. But you look at that interception, it was thrown into triple coverage and a ball that was forced that, if a rookie makes that play, it's understandable because it's a rookie. He is a multi-year vet. He shouldn't be making those types of throws. If we're going to have those types of interceptions throwing into triple coverage, let it be the rookie, let them learn from it. But Flacco doesn't learn anything from that.
Right. I definitely see your point there. The Browns picked two running backs in the offseason, Quinshawn Judkins from Ohio State, and they double dipped it with Dylan Sampson, who was a terrific performer at Tennessee last year. Yeah. Who is the best fit for in the long term, or do you feel like the workhorse back thing is a thing of the past, and that RB1, RB2, there's really no difference in today's NFL, in your opinion?
I think exactly that. There's no difference in the NFL anymore in an RB1, RB2. A lot of teams are going to go to a not even a running back by committee, but a running back by situation. You look at in the NFC North, you look at the Detroit Lions, how they have Jahmyr Gibbs for more passing and explosive plays, and then they have David Montgomery as the guiding force. I think that's what Cleveland's going for. Quinshawn Judkins is going to be that north-south, powerful, stiff arm type of runner. And then Dylan Sampson's going to be more of the explosive pass catcher, big home run threat type of plays. And I think that's eventually where the NFL's heading, is to have multiple running backs that teams can swap in and out dependent on the situation.
Mm-hmm. When you look at the Cleveland Browns right now, defensively, all the turmoil and the talks were Myles Garrett coming back, or was he going to be traded? And eventually, he finally pulled his trade request in exchange for a bigger contract. Tell me your thoughts on the whole drama this offseason, and do you think this was a smart move by the Browns, or do you feel like they should have at least given some consideration into trading Myles, given, his age and, his talent? Certainly, when you consider Micah Parsons' recent trade from Dallas to Green Bay, you could only imagine with the draft time just around the corner, Cleveland could have gotten significant return, whether it's the player or draft capital. What do you think about the whole situation now as you're looking back now?
So looking back, I think it was still the right move to pay Myles Garrett. I think the way that it had been gone about, Myles had been on Radio Row saying, I don't want to be here. I want to go somewhere to win. If the Browns had entertained a trade, they would have been selling for pennies on the dollar with Myles Garrett. So they wouldn't have gotten this top tier return. That being said, if you trade Myles Garrett at that point, you don't really have anything for this defense at the time that they could have hung their hat on. They didn't have an interior force. Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, obviously his neck injury, may not ever play football again, not back there. You still had Denzel Ward, who's a bit underrated in my opinion, but he's had trouble staying healthy, so I understand that. So by keeping Myles, you still have something that you can build around this team for the future. And he is a little bit older, but we also have to remember he doesn't turn 30 until December. So this is a guy who still has probably another 5 or 6 years of solid football, because ultimately he's an athletic freak at 6'4", 272. So I understand not trading him. Obviously, if you get a Godfather offer, if you get a Caleb Williams-esque type of offer like they got from Carolina, make the swing. But if you're looking at like the offer that Jerry Jones took for Micah Parsons, and of course that's Jerry Jones thinking he got a great offer, but that's pennies on the dollar. Sure. Then at that point, keep Myles. But I think that the easiest way out was to pay Myles, because then also if you elect to move him, there were a lot of veterans in this locker room: David Njoku, Jerry Jeudy, Denzel Ward, Joel Bitonio, Wyatt Teller, that you're then saying, okay, well, we're selling off our best player. That's going to say what this team's going to be. So then it's a fire sale. And then at that point, this team's much further off in terms of being down in the dumps than what they currently are.
I think the interesting question that surrounding the Cleveland Browns moving forward, at least this year, is, fair or not, I think Kevin Stefanski's job security could be, brought into question. Obviously, not all of it is on Kevin Stefanski's fault. I think it has more to do with Andrew Berry and his front office staff for, maybe not putting together a consistent team that can, win in a very, very tough AFC, North Division, mind you. Do you think Stefanski will at least survive this season, or do you feel like if things go south in a hurry, no matter who's at quarterback, Stefanski will have to probably take the fall?
I think Stefanski will survive this season, provided he shows an improvement over last year's 3-win season. If they get to the end of the season and there's only 2 or 3 wins on the docket and the team doesn't look improved at all and the rookies don't develop, then absolutely his job's on the line. But I think if the rookies continue to develop at the rate we've seen over the last 2 weeks, and at some point they figure out what they have with Dylan Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders, whether it's one of these guys can be the future, or if not, then they know they need to take one of the quarterbacks in the 2026 class with one of those 2 first-round selections. I think ultimately that's the question that we have to ask. I would say right now, gun to my head, I think Stefanski and Andrew Berry are both here next season. And I think the conversation as you go into this coming off season, take a quarterback in the 2026 NFL draft, and then you have 1 year to figure it out with this rookie and an advanced offense and a defense that would still be very well. And if they don't put it together next year, then at that point it's time to cut bait and start fresh.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. We'll get to the draft talk in a conversation in just a moment, but my guest tonight is Bill Sparks, who is the NFL draft expert and also covers the NFL and the the Cleveland Browns for the Right Sports Network. As you can see on the bottom screen right there, the Twitter handle is at TWSN, and then a couple of underscores right there. Yep. So, Bill, I want your honest opinion regarding my Chicago Bears. We got blown out in Detroit 52-21, which was something I did not see coming. Week 1, we had a lead against the Minnesota Vikings 17-6, and the missed field goal, a bad penalty that was called a holding that ruined the drive, and everything just kind of snowballed from there. And then week 2 yesterday, at least the Bears were in the game, but then Isaac Tesla's catch that was ruled out of bounds. But even though it was ruled inbounds, and then somehow, the refs decided to reward their own stupidity by giving the Lions a 1st and goal at the 6-yard line or 4-yard line with 6 seconds to go. A touchdown, 28-14, game over. The Bears just completely folded in the second half like a cheap chair. A lot has been made about, this year being somewhat of an evaluation period for Ben Johnson and his staff right now. And I would have to say right now that there are a lot of guys on this team who are more than likely starting this week. They're going to have to start, show a lot more to keep their job moving forward. What are your thoughts on the first 2 weeks under Ben Johnson, the Caleb Williams dynamics? It seems as though people like to poke fun at Caleb Williams because of his nail paintings and all that other non-football crap. And also that there has never been a 4,000-yard passer, so it's easy for the national media to poke fun at the expense of the Chicago Bears and their fans like myself. First 2 weeks so far, Ben Johnson, do you still feel that, Ben is the right guy for the job despite the bad loss yesterday and all of that?
I still think he's the right guy for the job. I think the conversation that we have to have is we are 2 games into an era of a coach who, you look at how he had that offense built in Detroit. He had Jared Goff as his passer. And then, like I talked about earlier, with David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs, obviously, and then a host of weapons on the outside. Do you have some of those weapons in Chicago? Absolutely. You have Luther Burden at wide receiver, you have Rome Odunze, DJ Moore, you have Colston Loveland. So there's some talent there. But we are also 2 games in. I think the biggest thing that concerns me the most when I'm looking at Caleb Williams and I'm looking at his game is how he's handling pressure. And that's a big thing for me. As a quarterback in the NFL, you have to understand you're going to be under pressure consistently because even the greatest offensive lines in the NFL, Philadelphia, for example, their pressure comes. So how do you handle that pressure? And it seems almost like he's reverting back to his schoolyard panicked style, which just doesn't work in the NFL. You know, we saw it with Cam Ward in his first touchdown pass against the Rams, the 15-yard backwards run and scramble. It looks pretty when it works, but 90% of the time it doesn't. And for Caleb, it's a matter of how he's able to handle that pressure moving forward. You know, when you look at his statistics, whether he's kept clean versus under pressure, there's a pretty stark drop off. And as a quarterback that's able to be successful in the NFL, you've got to get those numbers to be a little bit closer. So ultimately, I do think that Ben Johnson's the right move. I think Ben Johnson and Caleb Williams is a pairing that's going to work. We are 2 games into it, so they pump the brakes on this might be Caleb's last year. This isn't the right move for Ben Johnson. Right. Bears fans, come back down off the ledge. There are some absolutely good things about what Caleb Williams has been able to do, and you look at his work, especially working over the middle of the field and working the intermediate parts of the field, which is where the NFL thrives, is over the middle between the numbers and the intermediate stuff. He's doing some good things there, but ultimately it's how he's going to continue to handle pressure is going to determine whether it makes or breaks it for Caleb Williams.
Yeah, the offensive line was a problem last year. We thought it fixed. You know, we got Dahlman, Tooney, and then Jonah Jackson. Outside of Jonah Tooney yesterday, everybody pretty much on the offensive line committed some stupid bonehead penalties, which put the offense at 2nd and 20s, even 2nd and 32 at one point. Before Caleb threw an interception that was well short to, you know, Olamide Zacchaeus, unfortunately. Yep. Thankfully, that, you know, the Lions did not score on that one. But obviously, outside of that pick, you know, Caleb showed some definite growth from week 1 where he regressed badly as the game went on. The conversation that I had with Adam Rank from the NFL Network, we know he's a big Bears fan, and certainly I wasn't trying, neither one of us was trying to call out a certain player or players when your team is as bad as they are. And you can probably attest to, you know, being a Browns fan, the years of ineptitude and incompetence has kind of, you know, permeated down towards the players and the coaching staff, fortunately. And, you know, now we're going to have to start thinking about, okay, my question obviously would be, and even Ben Johnson said it earlier this week, we're going to find out who practices hard, and there are going to be some changes in the coming weeks. I think the players are somewhat familiar with that. Their job is on the line because this is an evaluation period where you're going to have to start making some, you know, business decisions or, you know, how you perform, not just in practice, but also on the field as well. And, you know, the mantra, of course, with Ben Johnson is that, you know, he's going to be judging you when you don't have the ball. You know, if you don't block, you don't get the rock. So, or something similar to that is the mantra that was being said. So when you look at the Bears roster right now from offense and defensive perspective, which players do you think are kind of like on the brink of losing jobs? I can give you a couple of guys, and that was probably being mentioned, you know, very popular name today when Ben was pointing out something about not happy with the offense. I think at the very top of the list would be wide receiver DJ Moore. His attitude has somewhat been questioned, even dating back to last year when, you know, he had the career numbers with Justin Fields in his final season in 2023, but the last 2 seasons, even this year, I don't want to say he's become somewhat of an afterthought, but, you know, it's quite clear Rome Odunze is the receiver number 1. And then they also have Luther Burden, who Johnson probably wanted him as much as anybody else, along with wide receiver coach Antoine Randall. And I think you got to have to start using, you know, players like that, you know, otherwise your 2025 draft is basically an unmitigating disaster right now. Defensively, I can think of, you know, Tyreek Stevenson. Yeah, unfortunately, he was very bad. I think he's still dealing with the hangover from the Washington Hail Mary disaster. Al Harris, unfortunately, has not been able to unlock him and elevate his game. Montez Sweat, for what he's being paid, close to $30 million. He had a sack, but that was negated by penalties by both teams, unfortunately. I don't think he has any sort of an issue with the injuries and whatnot. But when you look at the Bears roster right now, who do you think is in danger of losing their job or being traded if things doesn't go well moving forward?
Yeah, so the big thing when you look at a roster like this, like the Bears, where there's key components everywhere, especially in terms of youth, you have to look at the guys ahead of the youthful, and you hit on the first one, DJ Moore. You have Rome Odunze, you have Luther Burden behind him, and then you have a pass catching tight end in Colston Loveland who you can use in a power slot method, similar to how Cleveland does with David Njoku and Harold Fannin. So when you get a new coach, they obviously want to bring in their culture. They want to bring in what's worked for them in the past. And we've seen the culture and how well it's worked in Detroit and what that looks like. So I think that there are a lot of players that have to adjust to it. Yes, it's been 2 weeks in the regular season, but also you have all of summer camp, you have all of preseason, you have all of training camp. So I would think one of the big ones would be DJ Moore, and partially just because there is a lack of wide receiver talent across the NFL, that if DJ Moore were available, teams could come calling and they could get a pretty sizable haul for DJ Moore. Not nearly what he was traded for as a part of the Carolina trade, but you could just as easily get a third round selection for him for the right team and the right price. Another one that you kind of mentioned in Montez Sweat. I think, obviously you have Deo Odobengo on the opposite side from free agency. He's shown up and done very well. I know obviously Austin Booker on IR, another young player that was expected to take that kind of next step. Yeah. Eventually maybe in a rotation piece with Montez Sweat. Again, like wide receiver, pass rushers come at a premium in the NFL. And, if a team like Dallas, for example, comes calling for Montez Sweat, is it something that you want to go and say, hey, maybe this is it for you? Another name I'll throw out there that's kind of a little bit on the sneakier side is Gervon Dexter, a defensive tackle. Through the first 2 games, just hasn't really looked like he's kind of fit in very well. He's creating penetration and he's getting to the quarterback, but it just seems like he's not quite lost, but just not quite getting it as quickly as you'd hoped. So and especially with teams that are in need of defensive tackle help across the league, it's another one of those things. You don't really want to get rid of your players after 2 weeks, but if somebody calls you up and says, hey, we'll give you a 3rd round pick for Dexter, or we'll give you a 3rd round pick for DJ Moore, or we'll give you X player who's a better fit for your team, and we'll take DJ Moore in a player for player swap. I mean, if it's a better fit for their career and you get a better return, who are you to say no as a franchise?
Absolutely. And I think this is something that you could kind of sympathize with being a Browns fan, is that front office has not done a real good job. And yesterday's blowout loss, I think a lot of people in Chicago, the media and the fans, are really, really getting upset now with the job Ryan Poles has done as a general manager. He's 15-36. In his first 3 years up until last year, now 15-38, including the 0-2 start this year. Yeah. It's I think a lot of people were kind of like scratching their head, like, why were they so, fast to extend the contract? Because, Ben Johnson wanted him. Poles played a huge role. And of course, landing Ben Johnson, even though his job security was somewhat up in the air and there were some question marks. It's quite possible that, maybe Ben Johnson has now more of a GM type role, whether we want to admit it or not. Like, kind of when, John Gruden used to have some, power in personnel decisions as well as being a head coach. You've seen the Browns, screw up draft picks and personnel decisions and different coaches and GM combinations. From your perspective, do you think like Ryan Poles should be, be fired if things doesn't improve? Because there has been some precedents about, John Robinson with the Titans getting an extension and then getting fired, although it seems as though this was more of a, him losing out to Mike Brable over, a personnel decision battle. And then Steve Kine also getting extended and losing his job less than a year later. Although I will add that, with Steve Kine, he was, an alcoholic. And I don't say that lightly. And then that might have played more of a huge role when it comes to his firing with the Arizona Cardinals. So there are some, precedents where guys getting extended, but they still get the boot less than a year later. Do you feel that way with Ryan Poles and the job he has done putting this team together?
I think the big question you have to ask is, as you hit on it a little bit, how much power does Ben Johnson have in personnel say? Because if it's Ryan Poles assembling talent and then saying, hey, Ben Johnson, here's the ingredients, go cook something, then at that point it's a conversation of, okay, you're not giving the good ingredients to the chef to make the meal. But if Ben Johnson is saying, okay, well, these are the players that fit my scheme the best, Ryan, here's the guys that I want, here's who you need to target. I need a Colston Loveland type of tight end pass catcher. Can you go make that happen? And then Poles makes that decision. Then at that point, it is a whole different conversation, because if the offense is not succeeding and the team's not succeeding, it's because together they're not working correctly. I would say I don't think that Poles should be fired after this season, barring an otherworldly collapse. And I'm talking 3 to 4 wins. I'm talking the team looks disjointed. I'm talking there's issues in the locker room and it's fragmented. And then at that point, not only is Poles gone, but you have to have the conversation of Ben Johnson being a one and done guy, which I think there's probably a 1% chance of that happening. I would say what probably likely happens is this year, Bears fans are probably looking at a 7-win season. Caleb Williams looks better, takes that next step. They go into the 2026 draft, fill a few more holes, and then 2026, I know it's said time after time in Chicago. We say it time after time as a part of the Cleveland Browns fan base. Next year's our year. Yeah. But I think you have to give it that time. Rome's not built in a day. And that's one of the biggest issues in the NFL is everybody is trying to immediately get that quick fix, that CJ Stroud to Houston, that Jaden Daniels to Washington. Sure. We just watched Jaden Daniels against the Green Bay Packers and how he looked like he might be going through a sophomore slump this year. So pump the brakes, temper the expectations. I think barring an unforeseen collapse of 3-win season, Poles and Ben Johnson are here next year.
Okay. I would think so. I think it's similar to what Dan Campbell went through with his rebuild in Detroit. I live in the Detroit area, and people mocked him nonstop because of his initial press conference and his coffee addictions and stuff like that. Ben Johnson was on that staff as a tight ends coach, became an OC in 2002. They started 3-13-1 his first year, 1-6 at one point in the second year, and then they were ready to run him out of town, and for a good reason. But they finally turned it around, sent Aaron Rodgers packing out of Green Bay in the final game of the 2022 season. And from that point on, they are 27-7 the last 2 years. It does take time, and it's understandable. Fans like myself, we're all frustrated with the Bears' ineptitude, but I'm certainly believe that Johnson deserves a lot more time. And there will be some players who are likely playing for their jobs, and they might be gone before the end of the season. So very interesting to see how they respond after a debacle in Detroit, and with the national, attention this week with the Bears and the Cowboys on Fox Game of the Week with Kevin Burkhardt and Tom Brady coming into Chicago. So hopefully this will be a much better game, and hopefully a win for first win of the season. All right, let's move on to college. And, week 3 is in the books, and certainly, something that Ken and I discussed yesterday in the discussion. UCLA and Virginia Tech both fired their head coaches. Both are, historic programs going through some real tough times right now. UCLA with Deshaun Foster, former running back, former NFL player, seemed like a real bad misfit. And then, a lot of criticism being leveled against their AD, Martin Jarmond. Virginia Tech fired Brent Pye, losing to Old Dominion, which you paid pretty good money to try and beat them up, and instead you got kicked in the nuts for the lack of better terms. Now, my question is, when you look at the two programs right now, what kind of coaches do you think that would fit the bill right now? Because UCLA left Pac-12 to go to Big Ten, and it looks as though it's a colossal mistake. And then the program looks to be in downright shambles. People, you would think that playing in Los Angeles with the talent in California and everything, it seems to be lined up pretty good, but unfortunately, it doesn't seem like UCLA is not once they were before. What kind of a coach do you think UCLA would be looking for right now?
Yeah, so the big thing when you're looking at a program like UCLA, obviously you're now in the Big Ten, the lights are brighter. You're still the little brother of USC, as much as UCLA fans don't want to admit that. You'll always be that little brother to their big brother. So I think the big thing, if you're UCLA, you're looking for three things out of your next head coach. The first thing is you're looking for someone who understands West Coast recruiting, getting into the talent hotbeds of California and Nevada and Oregon and the state of Washington to keep that talent on the West Coast. That's the first big thing. The second big thing is you need someone to set a culture. This UCLA team just doesn't have it. There's no culture. There's no foundation. It's moving on quicksand. And then the third thing is you need someone who's going to be able to get the most out of Nico Alameava at quarterback. Because yes, you brought him in from Tennessee. You're paying him this NIL money that you just can't easily say, okay, well, now you're on the bench. You're paying the guy. It's just like in the NFL. You pay a large contract to a quarterback. You got to kind of make it work. So you're looking for an offensive-minded head coach. You're looking for a guy who understands the West Coast recruiting, and you're looking for a guy who can kind of come in and set a culture. I would say probably the best fit is Tony White, former UCLA linebacker, now at Florida State, I believe. Definitely would be an excellent fit. Obviously, some other names. Obviously, the hot name that's always going to be out there when you talk about head coaching in college is John Gruden. Obviously, we've seen John Gruden with his work with Barstool, and then obviously in the NFL with Tampa Bay and with the Oakland Raiders as well. So anybody who understands West Coast, it's John Gruden. But I think UCLA is in a very, very tough predicament, considering that you now have to find a guy who checks all three of those boxes, but also, by the way, you're struggling with, the money that you still owe to Cal to get out of your Pac-12 deal. And then obviously that Big Ten money hasn't quite hit yet. This will be the first year where it actually does kind of hit their payroll and hit their revenue stream. So you can't really pay for the top end talent. So now you got to try to raid the lower group of fives and the lower Power 5 teams to see if you can get someone who's willing to make that jump to the next level. But ultimately, they're going to find that their pickings are few and far between, short of a guy who's just willing to say, I can fix it. I can fix UCLA. That's the kind of guys they're going to have to take a swing on.
What about Virginia Tech? I'm not saying that, Brent Pye and the people before that, Frank Beamer, Frank Beamer certainly built this program from literally from bottom up and had some real great moments with, Michael Vick, their domination in the Big East, and then, the ACC, they had some nice moments there, but with the, the conference realignment and the program that is struggling 0-4 right now, 0-3 right now. Where do Virginia Tech go from here to kind of get back on track? Is this a program that's kind of like in UCLA situation, or do you feel like at least Virginia Tech is a better, has a better foundation of sorts?
Yeah, I think Virginia Tech's got a little bit of a better foundation because they're still established in the ACC. They're not going into a new conference somewhat. I think Virginia Tech, obviously, the first phone call that you have to make is to South Carolina and see what you can do to get the young Beamer in your building, because obviously that is a feel-good moment for boosters as you try to raise NIL money. If not him, then obviously Michael Vick, who's in the coaching ranks now, to see what you can do to kind of drive NIL money, because that's the big thing. When you're in the ACC and you're competing with teams like Miami and Florida State and Clemson's and even some of the other ones, like now we've seen Cal come along with JKS and Georgia Tech with Haynes King, you've got to be able to go out and get talent and also find a quarterback. Obviously, they have Kyron Drones, but he's a senior. So, what's the next era of Virginia Tech football going to look like? I think the big thing is you've got to find someone who can reestablish Virginia Tech as a a top tier program and help rebuild that culture, but also someone who can get boosters and NIL excited to say, hey, I represent Virginia Tech, because that just hasn't been there in quite some time. So I think for me, the top two list obviously would be Beamer from South Carolina, and then Mike Vick from, the lower rankings, obviously is a feel good moment. But if you can't get either of those, again, John Gruden's name will always be on that hot list, as well as Alex Galesh from South Florida, who's been a hot coaching name here making the rounds recently. Obviously Florida to Virginia, staying in that southern part of the region, knows the recruiting area well, already has a footprint in Florida where a lot of that talent resides. So I would say one of those three would be a perfect fit for Virginia Tech.
Let's switch over to the NFL draft, which is obviously your expertise. Right now, I'm sharing the screen of the ESPN's 2026 draft rankings by position. The quarterback is obviously the big story, coming into the season. Arch Manning's name was being thrown around casually, even though he's only started 2 games. And we'll get to Arch in a bit. But when you think about 2026 NFL quarterbacks as we speak right now, if we do not count Arch and his struggles right now with Texas, it seems as though the consensus number one seems to be at least start of the season, Cade Klubnik of Clemson. He has struggled badly. The team is 1-2 after being upset by Georgia Tech over the weekend. What is your top 5 quarterbacks so far as we speak right now in the next year's draft?
Yeah, so the big 5 for me, number 1 is Fernando Mendoza from Indiana, obviously coming over from Cal. Still looking very comfortable in that offense. But this is a guy who has the arm talent to make every throw, has the large frame, just guy that wants to slice and dice from the pocket. Think like a Matt Ryan-esque type of passer. My number 2, I'm significantly higher on than most people in the field, but it's Aiden Childs from Michigan State. Young, strong-armed, tall passer, very athletic, and has the wheels. Still needs to work on his processor a little bit and speed that up, as well as his accuracy on his deep ball leaves a lot to be desired. But if you want to see what he really looks like as a pro prospect and what his future could be, watch the Boston College Michigan State game from last week, and you'll see that's the best version of Aiden Childs you'll get. Think like a Jordan Love type of player at quarterback. My number 3 is Lenoris Sellers out of South Carolina. Just big arm, athletic. Hasn't ever met a sack he can't get out of. Just a magician in the pocket. The concern is he's obviously still young, just 20 years old, still learning how to play the quarterback position somewhat, learning how to process and work from the pocket. But that's kind of like a Dante Culpepper type of quarterback, big arm, athletic, can make every throw on the NFL field that you need. Number 4 for me is Garrett Nussmeier from LSU. Has everything you want in terms of arm talent, as well as a processor in the pocket and being able to make the correct read and being accurate with his ball placement. The problem is you're looking at outlier size. 6 foot, 200 pounds is very light and very small for an NFL quarterback. Obviously we've seen quarterbacks come into the league in that same size. Baker Mayfield, for example, which is my comparison to Garrett Nussmeier. That can make it work as the number 1 overall pick, but it is still outlier size that you have to have a conversation with. And then my number 5 is a little bit higher than most people actually have him, and he's starting to come on here lately. It's Baron Morton, quarterback from Texas Tech. And you watch him, in that Texas Tech offense, he's got decent arm talent. He can make the NFL throws, but he doesn't have a flamethrower attached to his arm. But he can make every NFL throw that you need him to make. He's very accurate with his ball placement, but he's a magician in and out of the pocket in terms of sliding and being able to make plays. Think like Tony Romo, how Tony Romo was with the Dallas Cowboys, very athletic in the pocket, especially on the move, accuracy on the run. That's what you're going to get with Baron Morton.
Moving on to the running back, this is one of the positions that the Bears will probably likely to have to improve. Jeremiah Love, Notre Dame, got off to a rocky start against Miami. Had a very good game against the Texas A&M over the weekend, even with the loss. Nick Singleton of Penn State. Those are the 2 popular names right now. Are they number 1 and 2 in your preseason rankings as well?
Jeremiah Love is number 1. He is my number 1 running back. Nick Singleton is my number 4.
Okay.
The two in between, number 2 is Justice Haynes from Michigan. You watch just how he runs with power and violence, getting up and down the field, getting north and south in a hurry. And then number 3 is CJ Baxter out of Texas. Very good pass catcher, very athletic weapon, but also has the ability to get north and south as well. And then obviously number 4 is Nick Singleton out of Penn State. And then number 5 is Jonah Coleman. For me. And when you look at what Jonah Coleman provides, he's a short, stocky runner, but has burst, has the juice. Think like Michael Turner in his final few years with the Atlanta Falcons. That's the same style of runner that you're going to get with Jonah Coleman.
If the Bears were to pick a running back, who would be a best pick out of the names that you mentioned?
The best pick would be CJ Baxter. And the reason for that is Ben Johnson loves to be able to use running backs in the passing game, like what he did with Jahmyr Gibbs. And I think CJ Baxter fits that mold the best. The good news is I don't have a first round grade on CJ Baxter. I think he's a top 50 prospect. So you could get him at the top of the second round to pair with whatever option you may go in round 1.
Now, the receiver Bears certainly do not need one at the moment, as we speak, thankfully. The names that are very popular coming into this year, Jordan Tyson of Arizona State, Mekhi Lemon, Carnell Tate, who obviously gets a little bit overshadowed by, Jeremiah Smith. Are those 3, top 3 receivers in your books right now?
Shockingly, the only one that's in my top 5 of that name is Jordan Tyson of Arizona State.
Oh,
He's my
okay.
number 3 wide receiver. So I'm going to give your fans some new names tonight. My top wide receiver is KC Concepcion from Texas A&M.
Oh, from North Carolina last year.
Yes, correct. And you watch what he did, obviously against UTSA, but then also against Notre Dame, and how he was able to just get up and down the field with ease, very explosive after the catch, and does great on special teams as well. My number 2 wide receiver is Nick Harbor from South Carolina, just because when you look at him, 6'5", 230 pounds, an absolute just athlete, and still learning the receiver position. But if you're taking him, you're betting on the traits of what he can be. And then number 3, we talked about Jordan Tyson. My number 4 wide receiver is Jacoby Lane from USC, just a tall, athletic receiver, very good route runner.
Mm-hmm.
And then my number 5 wide receiver is Eric Singleton from Auburn, in that same mold of KC Concepcion, very athletic, in and out of breaks, being able to create his own yards after the catch with space is definitely what you're going to get from Eric Singleton.
Tight ends are obviously not a need for the Bears, but the popular name at the moment right now is Kenyon Sadiq, who has been a very good has had a very good start with Oregon. Is he the number 1 tight end in your books as well?
He is number 3 for me. I do see the vision with Kenyon Sadiq, but I've got 2 names higher than him right now. Number 1 for me is Brett Norfleet from Missouri. 6'6", very athletic, big body tight end, can make all the throws. Think Dallas Goedert as the tight end you're going to get with him. And then number 2 has come on here very recently. It's Michael Trigg from Baylor. Just a very athletic pass catcher in the same mold as Colston Loveland, kind of like a David Njoku type of tight end. Okay. Can block if you need him to, but is going to be more of that athletic pass catching tight end. Number 3, Kenyon Sadiq. Number 4 is Jack Endries from Texas. Very reliable weapon over the field as a security blanket. And number 5 is Eli Stowers from Vanderbilt, kind of in the Trey McBride role, very good pass catcher, a little bit undersized for the tight end position, probably closer to a power slot wide receiver than he is a tight end, but still a very fun option on the offensive side of the ball.
Now, offensive line, as a Bears fan, left tackle remains a problem as long as, it's been for quite a while. Looking at some of the popular names here, Spencer Fano and then Caleb Lomu both from Utah, obviously a very popular name. Francis Mauigoa of Miami, Caden Proctor of Alabama, and then Xavier Chaplin. Those are probably the top names I've been reading. How do you rank the offensive line as of right now?
Yeah, so right now my top one is CC Maui Noah from Miami, with then Caleb Lomu and Spencer Fano at 2 and 3. My number 4 offensive lineman, I'm a little bit higher on in the field, and it's Lili Fa'amoe from Wake Forest, a very excellent, mauling right tackle. And then number 5 is near and dear to some of the Chicago fans with how close he is. It's Caleb Tiernan from Northwestern.
Okay.
Very good left tackle prospect. Has shorter arms than you would like for a tackle prospect, but we did just see Will Campbell go with shorter arms in the top 5. So I think Caleb Tiernan can go there. And then my number 6, so 5+1, is Austin Barber from Florida, a very good left tackle prospect in the same mold of like a Taylor Moton type of prospect as well.
Guard is a position that's not really in recent years, the NFL has paying premium for the guard position. Guards, at least the Bears, certainly do not need to spend a top tier money on at the guard position. Who's your top rated guards in this year's class?
Yeah, so my big ones, the first one is Caden Green from Missouri, currently playing left tackle for Missouri, but I think he's a better guard at the NFL level. The second one is Chase Besantis from Texas A&M, kind of like a Jonah Jackson type of a guard, very good pass protector, still coming along in the run blocking aspect. For me, number 3 is Jaden Roberts from Alabama. Obviously want to see him kind of be able to stay healthy, obviously kind of get back to what he was previously, but I think he's a very high ceiling talent. Number 4 is Vega Ione from Penn State. I know that a lot of people are very high on him. Some, as you see on the screen there, have him as their number 1 on guard. I'm not quite there yet, but I think the ceiling is absolutely there for him. And then number 5 for me is a little bit of a sleeper. Currently plays tackle for Pittsburgh, but I think could be a better guard at the NFL level if you want a tall 6'7" guard. And it's Ryan Baer from Pittsburgh, just an out mauler in the run game, and just it has the ability to just move people out of the way.
And the center position, names that are pretty popular, somebody who's played the game for a while, Logan Jones and Parker Brailsford. Are those the 2 top ones, or do you have anybody else in mind?
So those are not my 2. My 2 top ones are Iapani Lalolu from Oregon, and then I also have Jake Slaughter from Florida as my top 2 centers right now. And then as you obviously move down my list, one name to keep an eye on is Connor Liu from Auburn. Very good center, kind of in the mold of an Eric McCoy type of center for the Saints. My colleague over at the OBR Draft Show, Jake Roach, actually is one of my guys for this class, and it's well warranted.
Now, the edge rusher is something that I think a lot of the Bears fans will keep a strong eye on as the season goes on. Ruben Bain is the popular name, of course, with a name like Bane from Batman, obviously.
Yeah.
TJ Parker is the name. Mataya Uiagalelei, that's the brother of DJ Uiagalelei. Of course, there are some very good names out here. Who is the top 5 edge rusher prospects in your book right now?
Yeah, so my top 5, number 1 is Ruben Bain from Miami. He's actually my number 1 overall prospect in this entire class. So I would take him number 1 overall. Number 2 is Keldrick Falk from Auburn. Very athletic type of guy in the same mold of like a Ezekiel Ziggy Ansah type of edge rusher. Number 3, TJ Parker from Clemson. Even though he hasn't had the greatest start to the season, you still see the flashes of what made him a top 15 guy being talked about. Number 4 is Mikhail Kamara from Indiana. A little bit of an undersized edge, but does a lot of the things that you want to do well from an edge perspective, especially from the pass rush standpoint. And then number 5 is Mateo Ugalele from Oregon. Long, strong, athletic edge rusher that you can mold into either an edge rusher or maybe sliding inside to a defensive tackle.
Who fits the mold better for Dennis Allen's system with the Chicago Bears out of the top prospects here?
I would say out of the top prospects, the two that you would want to look at for Chicago would be Keldrick Falk and Mateo Ugalele from Oregon. Keldrick Falk has the athletic traits that you would want to put next to Adeo and just, unleash him after the passer and, use that length and that speed and that athleticism. And Mateo Ugalele has the length and the athletic ability to do the same. Another guy who does have that as well as edge a little bit further down my board, but obviously near and dear to the Chicago faithful, is Anto Saka from Northwestern. Kind of in that same mold, very athletic, very skilled as a pass rusher, just hasn't quite put it all together yet. But I think he can, and he's on the outside looking into my top 5 right now. But the next couple of months, he might just jump up there.
As an Illinois fan, I'm a little bit biased. What do you think of Gabe Yakas and his fast start so far?
Yeah, so I think Gabe Yakas and his fast start, I think it definitely shows the ceiling that he has as a pass rusher. He's a little bit further down my board just because while he's had that fast start, I do want to see more consistency from him. I want to see him put it all together for a multitude of seasons. But this is a guy that you're talking about with Gabe Yakas, 6'3", 275, just absolutely built very well, super athletic too. This is a guy who's bench pressed 285 pounds 22 times. And, former defensive tackle for Illinois, Johnny Newton, says, he looks like he's been lifting since middle school, as an absolute freak of nature. So anytime your teammate says that, it says a lot. And especially his background as a wrestler and a former wrestler, it allows him to get leverage and hand placement in the trenches that other edges don't necessarily have. But he's also very flexible. This is a guy, he can put his hand in the dirt in a 4-3 scenario, or you could stand him up in a 3-4 scenario as an outside linebacker, and he can rush the passer that
way. Defensive tackle, most consensus number one in this position seems to be Peter Wood of Clemson right now. Is he your number one, and who are some of the other prospects that you are keeping an eye out on?
Yeah, so shockingly, Peter Woods is my number 2 defensive tackle. I'm not quite sold on the Peter Woods train. My number 1 is Dante Corleone, the Godfather, from Cincinnati.
From Cincinnati, yes.
Yes, I think despite his size, he's one of the best run defenders in this class, as well as just has the athletic ability to get after the passer with ease. And then obviously you look at Peter Woods at number 2. Number 3 is Caleb Banks out of Florida, even though they just announced earlier today that he'll be out long-term with an injury. So we won't get to see him go to work. Number 4 is Daryl Jackson from Florida State, kind of in the mold of a Calais Campbell type of defensive tackle. Could use him along the line in a multitude of ways. Number 5 for me is come on here recently. It's Big Citrus, Dominique Orange from Iowa State.
Yes.
I think.
Yeah.
Yes. I think he's a guy to keep an eye on as we move through this draft cycle.
Let's move down. Linebacker, that's another position that Bears might be of interest. We know that historically the linebackers have always been, many Hall of Famers here. Sonny Styles from Ohio State has been a very good big name. Of course, his father was a Ohio State player. Whit Weeks suffered an injury and missed in the second half, if I'm not mistaken, of the Florida game over the weekend. Anthony Hill of junior from Texas is another popular name. How do you see the linebacker class lined up as we speak right now?
Yeah, so as we speak, my number 1 linebacker is Anthony Hill Jr. from Texas. Very athletic, can create separation, obviously, in terms of getting after the passer and be able to create penetration, getting through the defensive line. Number 2 for me is Drake Bowen from Notre Dame, very physical, old school, downhill type of linebacker. Number 3, Amari Campbell from Penn State, very good sideline to sideline athletic, but can also get north and south. Number 4, CJ Allen from Georgia. Think like a Fred Warner type of a linebacker, a guy who checks every box and can kind of do it all. And then number 5, sticking with Georgia, is Raylan Wilson. We saw obviously the kind of rise that we saw out of Mykel Williams last season from the linebacker position. I think Raylan Wilson has the ability to be a much higher riser than Mykel Williams is. Kind of reminds me a lot of Roquan Smith every time I turn on the tape for Raylan Wilson.
Yeah, a former Bear, as we all know. Looking at the secondary cornerback, it seems as though, from a Bears perspective, with Jalen Johnson pretty much almost out of the season and Tyreek Stevenson stinking it up right now, it has suddenly become a position of, a massive need right now. How do you rate the cornerbacks in the upcoming 2026 class?
Yeah, so my number one cornerback is Avion Terrell from Clemson. Just a
Mhm.
little bit undersized, but has the ability of his brother AJ Terrell, Atlanta Falcons quarterback. Number two for me is Christian Gray from Notre Dame. We saw his highs and his lows against Texas A&M this past weekend and what he can be. Number three for me is Tacario Davis from Washington. Big 6'4", 200-pound, long corner, able to work very well. Think like a Tariq Woolen type of cornerback when you look at him. Number four is Malik Muhammad from Texas. Just has every ability that you could ask for in terms of coverage, in terms of man coverage, zone coverage, and the athletic ability. And then number five for me is Jermod McCoy. Jermod McCoy has every talent and trait in the book that you could want at the cornerback position, but I do need to see him bounce back from that ACL tear in January and how he's going to look post ACL tear before I put him any higher. But he's number one in talent. Just got to see him stay healthy.
And then finally, the safety position. Caleb Downs is the name that everybody probably knows. Probably consensus top 5 player, regardless of the position. How do you look at the Caleb Downs, and basically the rest of the safety class? Because it does look pretty strong, and the Bears will probably have to be in the market for safety next year.
100%. Yeah, this safety class is very strong, especially through the first 3 rounds. Obviously you have Caleb Downs, who's going to be a top 5 player regardless of position. Then you have Dylan Thieneman from Oregon, who would be a first rounder in any other year and probably safety 1 in any other year. But just this year, he gets paired with Caleb Downs. Number 3, Kamari Ramsey out of USC, a guy who can kind of do it all for you at the safety position, kind of like a Swiss Army knife, like a Derwin James type of player. Number 4 is a Michael Taff from Texas. This guy's a little bit undersized for the position, but that never stopped Kyler Gordon from being very effective in the nickelback safety kind of hybrid role, which is what I could see Taff coming into. And then my number 5 is a little bit under the radar, but he's starting to climb the board a bit. It's Emmanuel McNeil Warren from Toledo.
Okay.
When you look at his skill set, it's a very box heavy safety. This is a guy who will come down and hit somebody as hard as he can, but can also cover the back end of the field. Think like Antoine Bethea during his time with Indianapolis next to Bob Sanders. And that's what you're going to get from Emmanuel McNeil Warren.
Mm-hmm. Well, we went through all the positions, and it gives some credence to some of the players that would fit in the Bears right now. I really appreciate your time tonight. Just a couple of minutes asking some questions regarding your background, how you got into this. So how did you kind of like get into this discussion on the NFL draft prospect? Did you have any background in football or coaching or something like that?
Yeah, so it started really in 2015. Obviously, being a Browns fan, I've been a Browns fan since 2007. In 2015, I said, hey, I start early enough with the NFL draft every year. Let me actually kind of get more in depth with things. Sat down with a few colleagues that had been in the industry for years and kind of picked their brains on that. And in 2015, I made my first board, as I like to call it, first big board of 75 prospects. And I sat down and I watched the film and kind of, took away different things that I saw. And then obviously sat down with a few of my other colleagues in the industry and kind of picked their brain on things. And just over the last 10 years, picked up different things from different folks. And now so far, every year on average, I have a big board of about 400 players that are graded, sorted. And then I also am known as what they call the comp king. So I have a comparison for every player that I grade and that I watch film on, just to kind of give the average fan an idea of, hey, this is the player in college, but this is what he's going to play like when he gets to the NFL level.
Mm-hmm. So how did you kind of like learn about film evaluation, and what are people telling you? What they taught you about looking at the film. It's because obviously, not every people have access to like films like most people do in the industry. And no one can certainly sit in front of one game, all like 3 hours of it, all of it. What's the best way to like kind of learn about studying and watching films, and then understanding the strength and weaknesses of each players when you watch them?
Yeah, 100%. The biggest thing, the first thing that I was taught when I was watching film was never to watch the ball, watch the players around it. And that's one of the biggest things is watch what the other players are doing, what's their responsibility and what's their role in the given play. If you're watching a wide receiver, is their role to get down the field quickly? And sometimes it means watching a play 2 or 3 times, hitting rewind and saying, okay, this player's role is to get down the field. So how well are they doing that? Are they quick at doing that? Does it take a few extra steps? And then once you determine one player's role, move on to the next one. Okay, I know what this player is doing, so now I need to go to this player. I know what that player's doing, and you keep on moving. And over time, you'll start to see, okay, well, I know what this person's role is before you even hit play on the film. But then also not only knowing what their role is, but what their role is not. And what that means is, if you have, for example, a left tackle whose responsibility is to seal off the edge rusher from getting to the quarterback. Okay, so I know that the left tackle is going to block to his left. So then that means the left guard's responsibility should be to follow to the left to fill the gap, so to speak, and so on and so forth, until you eventually say, okay, well, I know what the gap scheme is and I know what the protection should be. So now I know what the protection should be. I know what the players should be doing. So now it moves to the quarterback position. Okay, I know what everybody should be doing and where everybody's supposed to be. So how does the quarterback interpret it? Do they look and say, okay, this person's covered and move on to the next read? Or do they stick on that one read waiting for them to get open? Or do they work within the offense or kind of swim upstream, so to speak? And those are the types of things that eventually just over time you pick up on.
Mm-hmm. And who are some of the biggest people who have supported you kind of through your, endeavor, through journey? And then what do you hope to eventually get out of, what is your end goal moving forward with what you're doing right now?
100%. So a few names that I'll shout out here, obviously, John Vogel at Draft Vogel, one of the biggest.
I've had him on my show a couple of times.
Yes. When I got started in this industry, he was one of the biggest names, one of my biggest sounding boards. Another one, Jim Wickens at NFL Draft Fanatic, No Iron Fanatic, working with the draft professors, yes. Building a culture of guys we have over there. We have over 90 plus people in our community that, just kind of help each other and soundboard off each other. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention these other 2 names. The first one, Malik Wright, over at the Right Way Sports Network, gave me one of my biggest starts, obviously, in content creation in terms of writing content, analyzing content. And then obviously my other colleague, Jacob Roach at Roachism13 on X, writer for the OBR network as well. We actually do a co-host pod together, pretty much sit down frequently, go over film together, go over different prospects. So those folks, I'm sure there's many more people that I've interacted with over the past few years. A few other names, Corey Kinnan, Dalton Miller, 2 other big names in the draft community who have kind of leaned on. Brian Maffey, another one as well. So a lot of talented folks in the draft community that I could probably sit here for another hour and give names of people who've helped me along my journey.
Well, on that note, we'll close out the live stream tonight with Bill Sparks. Please make sure to follow Bill on X at the Sparks Scouting, as you can see there down below. I cannot thank you, Bill, for taking time to spend time with us. I write with Fansided Network as well, with the beargoggleson.com. And, I'm kind of like new to learning, the more about nuances with the scouting and understanding the X's and O's, perhaps. But I'd love to have you on again, and maybe, when we're even not doing live streaming, maybe we can, at least I can seek your guidance in terms of learning the finer points of scouting, whether it's pro or college moving forward. And hopefully, and maybe before the end of the year, we'll have a better idea, with the college playoffs, and then also better idea of who is declaring, who is staying, etc., with the NFL draft 2026 around the corner. Thank you very much for doing this tonight, and love to have you on again. And good luck to you with your Cleveland Browns. And I know the Bears and the Browns are actually playing each other in December as well. So hopefully things are hopefully both teams are in a much better state than where we are right now. So thank you, and good luck to you in your good luck to you in your continued success with your work.
Yes, thank you, Stephen. Appreciate you having me on. Appreciate you giving me a chance to talk. Love to come back anytime. And as always, good luck to you and your Bears, and hopefully they turn things around as well.
And we thank you for joining us tonight on this live stream triple header. And we look forward to seeing you again next time on the Double A Team podcast live stream.